What I wanted to do today, I was talking with Lynn and Dave, just sort of, what do you want me to talk about? And sort of come up with this, just to talk about missions today, from everywhere to everywhere. So we'll begin with this. In the last century, in Edinburgh, England, 1910, the theme of the Lausanne Conference was from the West to the rest. And the way that worked was we send missionaries from the West to the rest of the world. And that was the paradigm that all our mission agencies operated on. Then, 100 years later, in South Africa and Cape Town, the theme changed. It was now from everywhere to everywhere. Some mission organizations have not changed that paradigm. They still believe if you're going to be a missionary, you have to cross some body of water. But that is not the case because we live in a global world, and the word that is used is glocal, combination of global and local connected together. A friend of mine was working among the Fulani tribe, which was a nomadic tribe in Africa. They all had these things and were connected with people in Europe and the United States. Their worship service was under a tree. Their school was an outdoor school in the middle, underneath a tree, yet they were connected internationally by this thing. So just from the old paradigm, how were missionaries distributed? Well, the top sending countries, of course, was the United States at 135,000, or 53% of the missionary force came from the United States. Second was Brazil at 40,000. Third was South Korea, coming in at 35,000. Philippines came in at 25,000, and China at 15,000. Now, where do we send missionaries? Now, the second largest sending country is Brazil. So let's take a look at Brazil. We send 20,000 missionaries to Brazil. And then we look at Bangladesh, only 1,000 sent. Do you see the disparity? There's this incredible disparity. We have not made the shift in regards to missions, where we deploy missionaries, and there's just an incredible change that I think needs to take place. So let's take a look at just how radically Christianity has changed around the world. So if I can continue on, you hold that question. The blue is north of the equator. The yellow is south of the equator. So back in 1900, 82% of all Christians were located in the north. We go to 2020, 33% of Christians are in the north, and 67% of Christians are in the south. The place the church is growing the most rapidly is Latin America and Africa. Projected out to 2050, 33% remains constant in the north, and 77% of Christians will be located south of the equator. When we were missionaries in Belgium, the two largest churches in Brussels were Zairean churches from the country of Zaire, or the Belgium, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was neither democratic nor republic. So, what are the trends that we see happening in regards to just religion in general around the world? If this is the map that things are changing this way, let me just also say that the reason for a lot of this particular growth that is going, the two things that are probably the things that are pushing this is, one, the charismatic movement. And it is not Pentecostalism, it is just a charismatic version. So as I work with Iranians, whether they are Presbyterians or Pentecostals, there is a huge charismatic worldview that's embedded into that, in the worship and the way that they do things. But it's also the prosperity gospel. And that is one of the big driving forces around the world in Christianity in the South. So what are some of the trends? I don't know if this can be seen too much, but I'll give you what they are. Number one, the first trend is that world is becoming increasingly religious. Most of you are old enough to remember Time magazine back in the 1960s, I think it was, or 70s, that said God is dead. There was a prediction that that would be the end of Christianity. And then the revivals took place and many different things. But what we're finding out is that the world is actually not becoming more secular. Actually, they're becoming more religious. Second of all, the world is becoming more religiously diverse. So, if you go south to the Chicago area and you go to the Woodfield Mall, do you know where the Woodfield Mall is? On 290, on that stretch there. There is a Hindu mosque, or a Hindu temple that's going up right next to the Woodfield Mall, just right along 290 that you see there. Some of the biggest Hindu temples and Muslim mosques are found here in the West. There is a sense of diversity that is taking place all across the world, and there are morphings of religion that are taking place, but people are religiously focused. So many of the people, particularly you look at Hollywood and some of the weird things that they are doing, they will take a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of meditation, they'll take a little bit of this, and they just sort of make this new kind of religion. So we're seeing that religion, because of its connections that are going on, people are making their own religion out of all of these types of religions. The third one is religiously liberty is on the decline. So, for instance, if you go to India, if you are not an Hindu, you are not Indian. So there is a massive persecution going on among the Christians and the Muslims by the Hindus. So this whole sense of nationalism is very strong. And because of this, we're seeing religious liberty being handcuffed. And if you look at the United States, it's one of the things, particularly with the woke movement that's going on, everything else can be tolerated except Christianity. And there are new laws coming that are trying to restrict any kind of influence in regards to the liberty that Christians have had in the past. That's just the reality, but it's across the world. The last one is that government restrictions are at the highest that they've ever been in regards to religions. So Russia is number one in regards to restriction, in regards to religion. Egypt, number two. Pakistan, number three. Nigeria, number four. In Nigeria, we have a person, a Nigerian family that came to our church, and she calls her mother every single day. The reason why is the Fulani jihadists are working through the middle part of Nigeria. North is Islamic, south is supposed to be Christian, and this group is running through the middle part, and they honestly don't know when they go out from their house if they will return that day. So that is the reality. So she calls her mother just to see whether or not she is alive. We have a Nigerian pastor who is in the Chicago area on the south side of Chicago. His brother was a pastor in Nigeria, was taken hostage by these jihadists and his entire congregation. And the people in their church on the south side of Chicago, many of them had to put their home up on mortgage their home so that they could send the money to the jihadists to free their relatives. So this is the type of thing that is going on, that you don't make it in the news, but this is the reality of these types of religious hostility that is taking place in the world. I just wanted to focus in on this type of thing. If the two largest religions in the world right now are Christianity and Islam. Christianity number one, Islam number two. Christianity is the only world religion that grows by conversion, not birth. That means that your kids are not born Christians. They have to choose to become Christian. Islam is growing by birth, not conversion. In fact, just recently, a prominent Muslim scholar said that, and he was a convert to Islam from Christianity. He was from St. Louis. He was in the hood. He was a bully, rapidly going down the round track, came across the Nation of Islam, converted to Islam. He's been a Muslim for 30 years, and he has said this: why would anyone convert to Islam? So he says anyone that is thinking about it, he just says, forget it. Why would anybody come into this chaos? But so the question becomes, in 1800, 33% of the world were either Muslim or Christian. So many of our missions went to the tribal people and that type of stuff. Now, in 2020, over half the world, or 57% of the world, are either Muslim or Christian. Projected to 2050, 66% of the world are going to be either Muslim or Christian. And my question for us is, do you know enough about the other world religions? Because they're going to be next door. You can no longer work only in your own enclave. You're going to have to know how to witness to people of other world religions, because over half the world is going to be either Muslim or Christian. So let's take a look more specifically here at the U.S. And this title here is that actually the U.S. is a receiving nation of missionaries. Now, you remember the pie chart that I had here before? The United States was the most sending of all, with 135,000 missionaries sent out. In 1965, 84% of Americans were non-Hispanic whites. In other words, we are the white population. 84% in 65. If we come to 2015, 64% of Americans were non-Hispanic whites. So there's a demographic shift that's taking place. In 2065, 36% will be non-Hispanic whites. So I take and say, if you look at your church, if your church is predominantly 95, 99% white, in 25 years, your church will be irrelevant. Do you get that? In 25 years, if we continue only doing what we are doing, we will be irrelevant and unable to reach our own community. To bring it even closer, in 2017, elementary and secondary schools were majority minorities. Anyone's been working in the public schools? What has been taking place there in your schools here in Sheboygan?
Jefferson, I think, was possibly 84% minority.
84% minority.
Close. They're between 70 and 80%.
In other words, well over half of the elementary school in Sheboygan are non-white. My question is, your church, what percentage of your church is non-white? Do you catch what I'm saying? In 2014, there were more than 20 million children under age of 5 that are 5 years old in the U.S., and 50.2% of them were minorities. So back in the 2014, that shift had already taken place. Let's take a look at some of the demographic shifts. In 65, 85% of Americans were non-Hispanic whites. Wait a minute, no, last one here. In 2045, U.S. will be officially majority. So that shift is going to take place in how many years? 20 years. Some of you will see that. Some of you. My dad lived to 100 years old, so I'm going to see it. Let's take a look another way, just sort of the racial makeup in 2044, just graphically. So less than 50% white, Hispanic coming in at 25.1%, Black at 12%, Asian 7%, multiracial 3.7%, and other, just this an agglomeration of all kinds of things. So that shift is coming very quickly.
Do you think that perhaps by 2044 we'll actually have a much higher percent of multiracial? I feel like among the people that I know, it is harder and harder to say this person is Black and this person is white and this person is Hispanic, but rather as we work against racism, we start intermarrying, if you will, and it's no longer, for example, my nieces are not, they don't fit into, I guess we call them multiracial, they don't fit into any of the categories, and I think that's great, that I don't have to be like, oh, those people over there, it's rather...
My people. Yeah, yeah, and just sort of the whole thing is, are we going to see more multiracial kinds of marriages? And yes, it's going to become the norm. So I'll just give you a little side issue. My wife is American, totally American. And I think they came over almost soon after the Mayflower, I think. I know, this just goes way, way back. She married me, and she thought that she was marrying an American. My mother and my father and my oldest sister come over on the boat in 1951 to the United States. And yes, didn't have enough money to go back again to Norway, and they've been stuck in the United States ever since.
It happened, yep.
So she's had to learn all kinds of Norwegian words and cooking different things that she'd never ever seen before. She does not like goat cheese. And some of these other things. Lutefisk, forget it. I've had it once and that's it. So now, let's go back to the missions theme. What are the top sending nations? So we had the United States, Brazil, Korea, Philippines. No, wait a minute, that's the wrong title. Oh, I think, let's see. Yeah, I think I have got the wrong. These are the top receiving nations. Sorry. The top receiving nations of receiving missionaries. So this title is wrong up here. The United States is the number one receiving nation, receiving country of missionaries. Brazil second, Philippines, and all of these other types of things. So that gives you, the U.S. is the number one receiving country of missionaries. So they've come home. Why are there missionaries in America?
Are your statistics basically reach global
No,
or international?
international.
From whom?
If you can read down here, this is taken from the World Christianity in Missions of 2020.
Okay.
Ongoing shift in global south.
Another question? You said that U.S. is the number one receiving nation.
Correct.
Now, is that receiving from other countries, or it's receiving? It could be domestic.
Receiving from other countries.
Okay.
Think of all of the Korean churches, the Chinese churches, Indian churches, and others, Nigerian churches, a lot of the Hispanic churches. They have come as missionaries here. So, why are there missionaries in America? Isn't this a Christian country? Are you working under that false understanding? We send out missionaries. We don't bring them in. And missionaries in America, I've never heard such a thing. You know, it just does not make sense. However, this gives us the number of migrants in Canada and the United States from 2020 as far as for immigrants and migrants. So migrants are the ones that are coming without documentations. Immigrants are more sort of coming with documentation type of thing. So you can see we have over 50 million in the United States with 2.9 million of the immigrants. So the United States and Canada, United States is much larger in having that, but combined it has 58 million. So let's take a look at some of the international students. I'm not sure if you can all see it from back there, but if we come and we look at, we've got 13,000 from Brazil, We've got 17,000 from Vietnam, 21,000 from Taiwan, but 274,000 from China, 68 from South Korea, Iran 10,000, Turkey 11,000, UK 10,000, but let's come to Saudi Arabia, 54,000, India 103,000. These are just the international students that are here. Kind of interestingly, they were sending Saudi Arabia was sending over 50,000 every year to the United States. The reason why they were sending them to the United States was because their whole economic, political system of their country is in absolute dire straits. And their educational system is built on something totally different. So they said, for us to have the most rapid change, we will send our best students to the United States to get an education. I just talked with a Pakistani guy that came to Trinity, and the reason why he wanted to go to Trinity to do his work in the United States was they wanted him to send, it was cheaper to go to the Philippines or to South Africa, but he goes, I've already done my graduate work in that area. I want the best education. So he said, it's coming to the United States. So this is the way that many of them view the way that it is. So here's the top receiving countries. So the United States, 38, Russia, 25,000, Brazil, 20,000, Democratic Republic of Congo, again, which is neither democratic nor republic, Congo at 15,000, South Africa 15,000, UK 12,000, 1,200, or 12,000, 10,000 Germany, France 10,000. So you see this, these are the receiving countries. So why are they coming here? I want you to listen really closely to the reasons. These were interviews that were done. For you that want to know the reference here, it is Rebecca Kim, professor of sociology at Pepperdine University in California, that did this research. So, number one, they want to evangelize both locally and internationally. That's why they're coming to the United States. They want to reach internationally as well as locally. Number two, it's a prime location for self-supporting missionaries. In other words, your children will get a good education. Well, see the world's best country. For those of you that are down on the United States, go to another country. And you come back and say, this is so much better than anywhere else. It's the wealthiest country. Now, it's not just wealth like you see in Saudi Arabia or Dubai or other places like this with all of the stuff from oil money. But as a country, our standard of living is across the board compared to the only rich and then the people with nothing. And they want to be in a great nation. So that's where they're coming. And no, they didn't get it from Donald Trump, make America great again. That was just, America is great. According to the world right now, they're not viewing that at all. And just sort of a side issue, the trajectory that we are on in regards to our educational system and the whole woke culture is not sustainable.
Well, that's good.
A medical school, which is not Christian at all on the East Coast, has made the decision that they will no longer do the Title 19 of in regards to accepting people, in regards to race and gender and all of this equation stuff. because the hospitals that were receiving the doctors were so poor in their education and their abilities that they have finally drawn the red line and said, we only accept the top students. That is not a Christian school. It is a school that says, we have a reputation to uphold, and we are not going to bow down to what the government or social media or anybody else says. We're going back to what we had in which we were successful in. So that's going to be another whole discussion, but honestly, there's only two routes that will happen. Either there will be implosion, like what we see in Rome when they were very woke and did the whole transgender stuff and all of that type of stuff, and the whole civilization collapsed overnight. Or we will wake up and say no, like it has happened in the great revivals that have hit. And they have reset the United States. And if we are not on our knees praying and pleading with God to do something, to have mercy for us, we will end up like Rome. Rome did not have the church. We have the church. We are the voice and the conscience of our society, and that is what we need to be. It's not politics. We are the conscience. And as Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy, if you want to live a godly life, what's the rest of it? You will be persecuted. I was at the theology conference this last month at Trinity, and we were talking about the whole gender issues and all of that type of stuff, and great presentations. And I got up and said this: isn't it about time that we embrace persecution rather than running from it? Because if we continue to run from it, we lose our voice. If we accept the persecution, we have a voice and we are standing in the gap. And the question is, are we going to stand in the gap, or are we going to hide in the shadows? But that's a sermon for something else. So let's go on. Continuing this whole reverse of missions. These are the things that the people are saying. The U.S. is the modern Rome, and a great place to base our mission movement. That's why they're coming. Rome had the connections to the rest of the world. The United States has the connections to the rest of the world. Number 4, the U.S. is a global nation. If they evangelize America, they can reach the people from all 4 corners of the world, including China and Muslim nations. The United States is therefore the most important mission field. Now, I have this question: is that your understanding? And if it is not, these others will set the standard and the way for the church.
Question, is that happening now?
These are quotes that this Dr. Kim said with the people that had come here as missionaries.
So then that's happening right now.
It's happening right now. Number 5, and these get more and more pointed. U.S. is a Christian nation in trouble. America has lost its spiritual fire with growing materialism, secularism, humanism, and sexual immorality. Missionaries are therefore needed to bring spiritual revival in America. And number 6, in the world of spiritual warfare, all of Christianity would be in jeopardy if the United States fell as the dominant Christian nation. The United States is the most important spiritual territory that missionaries must safeguard for Christianity to be dominant, to be the dominant world religion. When was the last time you witnessed to anyone? On the table I have this, the Jesus film from Crew. They have now taken and put it onto a QR code. Do you know what a QR code is? It will take you to the site of the Jesus film. I carry these with me with my phone because of my license, driver's license is my phone. And I will talk to anyone in a store or in a walk or whatever, and here's Easter is coming. Have you ever heard the story of Easter? And it has nothing to do with bunnies and chocolate. This will have the story of Easter. It will also have the story of Christmas and what Christmas is. Have you ever heard the life of Jesus? If not, this will do it, and it's translated in over 2,200 languages. So it is translated in that. So I had a friend was at the bank. She's from Lebanon. This was just on Friday, and so we were talking. I was asking how things and how bad things were in Lebanon, and is her family surviving? What's taking place? Because the whole economy is way out of whack. The government is so corrupt that actually people have taken guns into the bank to rob the banks to get their bank account so they can get their own money that's in the bank. I mean, that's how bad it is. So I talked to her and said, well, have you ever heard the Jesus story? And she didn't know. So I said, here's one. And I pulled my phone out, showed it to her, and there is a full page of all the Arabic versions. So I said, you can have Egyptian version, you can have North African version, you can have the classical version, you can have the modern version, and it had all these different versions. I said, you could just choose which one you want to hear. And she thought it was wonderful. She took it. But that's what I do. In this world, in multi-languages, you have got an incredible tool that you can talk and leave with anyone as a serving you in this world. Because if our world has changed, we have to become people that witness. We can't not do it. So let's take a look at Islam in North America. In the United States, there are 97 unreached people groups. If you've heard of Joshua Project, they're very much focused on people groups, unreached people that have not any gospel presentation that's done to them. So they are without witness in their own language. 97 of those groups are in the United States, totally unreached by the gospel. 55 of the 97 unreached people groups are Muslim. So we send missionaries to reach the unreached when we got 97 groups here and 55 of them are Muslims. So it's estimated between 4 to 5 million Muslims in the United States today. Muslims have put that figure up to 11 to 12 to 15 million. I don't go with that at all because I go with Pew Research and they have it much more realistic numbers. So The growth is primarily through immigration, secondary through birth rate. Some of the people have heard on the internet or on Fox News or whatever that they're having massive families. Guess what? People that go from one country to another adopt many of the values of the country they're in. So in France, the big thing there is not to get married, but live in what is called concubinage, or I'm not too sure what the English word is, but cohabitating. So the Muslims are doing the same thing. There are more dogs than there are children. And we're seeing it within the Muslim community as well, not having children. So the whole thing of they're coming over and taking over and having all of these children, it's not true. Yes, they're having lots of children back home, but they adopt and change to the values of where they are at. So that's where they're going. So the primary growth is by immigration and secondary by childbirth, but that birth rate is not high like it was back home. 25,000 conversions to Islam in each year. 7,000 are American women marrying Muslims each year. But as I said, this right now, Islam is so bad. There was a video that came out which was called Unmosqued. And it looked at mosques in the United States. And what the title of the video is Unmosqued, and it was that the mosques are empty. And particularly if they're getting people that are interested in Islam, they don't take them to mosque, they create them into a unmosqued mosque, which was sort of like a coffee bar, where it's a hipster type of thing. Because if they went to the mosque, they would be rejected, they would not be accepted, they would hear a sermon which was a very poor sermon, half of it in Arabic, in which 97% of the people don't understand, or 99% of them don't understand that Arabic. So they're telling stories that are found in the Hadith and have nothing to do with life. My colleague Mike Urton had their church go to the mosque to sit in a service there, and then the mosque said, "We'd like to have our kids come to your mosque, or your church." So he said, "We'll bring our youth group." So it was Christmas time, and they thought, okay, that's great, let's bring all these. Well, we might have 15, 20 kids that come. Well, in came car after car after car after car after car. There was like 60 of the Muslims that came. They sat in the service, and afterwards they had, the table for talking, debriefing, that type of thing, welcoming type of stuff. One of the young people said, "The music was fantastic." Turned to the imam, "Why can't we have music in our mosque? If I wasn't a Muslim, I'd become a Christian." The imam said, "I have never seen anyone ever be quiet and be still and not talk during the sermon. And yet here, everybody was silent. They had their Bibles open and they were taking notes." He says, "I've never seen that happen." The typical response is that people come into the mosque, they greet one another while the guy's preaching. Some of them are off doing prayers that they had missed that day, or they're just socializing. And then when he finishes and the call to prayer comes, then everybody rushes forward, lines up in a row, does their prayers. It takes about less than 5 minutes, and then they're gone. And here they sat through a service, and it was just incredible. When a survey was done with people who became Christians, they asked why. Number one was they met a Christian, and their lifestyle just grabbed them. Number two was being invited to a church. Seeing community. and what was taking place. So just give you a little bit of an idea of those are some of the things that are going on. Islam will soon replace Judaism as the second largest religion in the United States. And the number of mosques has grown from 160 in 1960 to over 2,769 in 2021. So there's this shift that is taking place. So the unreached people groups, it's taken from Global Gates. Number one is there's a large number of Persians. Top place is Los Angeles with 113,900 of them. And there are so many Iranians in Los Angeles that they now call it differently. It's called Tehrangeles. Taking Tehran, the capital of Iran, and Los Angeles, putting them together, and Tehrangeles. Many of the poets, writers, and all the media people in regards to film and that type of thing, that's all outlawed in Iran. So they have all come to the center of media and film industry in the United States, and their studios are here. They do this stuff, and then they pipe it back into Iran. That's just the shift that has brought so many of them here. There are 12 churches in the Los Angeles area that I know of. 12 in Los Angeles County, or 8 in Los Angeles County, and 8 in, 16 actually, and 8 in Orange County. But you've got them in Toronto, Riverside, New York, Washington, Vancouver, San Francisco, and Chicago, only with 5,000. And I've been helping out with some of the ones that are from Iran. If we look at Turks, Toronto has 23,000, New York City, Houston, Montreal. Right now, Chicago has become the center, a big center of the Turks. So this statistics is actually false. I mean, not up to date, because there's a massive center in Prospect Heights in the Chicago area. They took over a factory, and now it's their entire mosque out of which they do a lot of the stuff. So then you have here in regards to just the Jewish population, they are considered one of the top unreached people groups. So the north side of Chicago, where the large Jewish community is, or inside Chicago on the north side, are unreached peoples. New York City, unreached. And we think of them as just different, unreached peoples from Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, China, or some other type of things like this. But no, the Jews are very much an unreached people group. So the Jewish population is 5.8 million adults, but most of them define themselves as Jews of no religion. It's more cultural. So Detroit has unreached people groups, Chicago, Los Angeles. Just to give you another idea of the top unreached people groups in North America, you've got the Buddhists at 2%, the Hindu at 31%, Muslims at 44%, and the Sikhs at 8%, and 15% are the Jewish. Those are the top or unreached people groups. So now the question becomes, what are the action steps? Number one, I think we need to partner with emerging ethnic congregations. So on our YouTube channel, we have how to do the church within a church. The typical response is the landlord model. You come, you can use our facility, you rent from us, but don't do it during any of our time. As a first generation immigrant, my language of Norwegian was concrete relational. By that I mean my parents would talk to us as children. Go do this, go do that, fix this. You know, it's all of these command types of responses. So I'm fluent in that Norwegian. Then we would go to the Norwegian church in Chicago in Logan Square. And I didn't understand Norwegian at all because it was all conceptual. And conceptual, the vocabulary changes, the sentence structure changes, and the verb tenses change. And I did not have that as a part of my understanding of the language, because I was raised in an English context, and my parents couldn't help us past third or fourth grade. So from that point on, education was a struggle for me and us as kids, because we didn't have the help that we needed, like you have done with your children, educating them, supplementing what the school does. So partner with the congregations, because the second generation is going to be in English. They will not have the vocabulary of the first generation, and they will lose the second generation if there is no place for them within the church. So the church, if you're going to partner, it needs to have a strategic way of partnering, not as a second-class citizen, but as a co-equal in ministry, reaching the diversity that has happened in our community. Number two is to identify a point person in a congregation, preferably somebody with cross-cultural experience, such as retired or returned missionaries, persons who have done short-term mission trips, persons who have been previously involved in refugee ministry, cross-cultural. Third, gather a point of interested people in the congregation. Pray and plan of how to host, engage, and partner with resettling agencies and ministry services, embrace the refugees in the life of the church, and mentor them. And there's just a Bible verse I give to you. Would somebody read this?
After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands. Revelation 7:9.
That can start to happen in the United States. We have the opportunity of seeing Revelation 7:9 taking place, or we can say, I'll be in my own corner and not. Here's just the conclusion from Kim. Sources of theology, language of worship, schisms of denominations, role of women in churches, impact of poverty and economic inequality, the acceptance of the LGBTQ people, the visibility of different able people, and a host of other issues are in the hands of the emerging Christian leaders from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Oceania, and will continue to be the top lists of the concerns of the church for the future. And we have a way of helping in that process. So let's pray. Lord, thank you for the time that we've had together in worship, in coming together. We thank you as well for what you're in the process of doing. And Lord, we have to admit that it is chaotic. It is messy. It is not what we are familiar with. And yet you are stirring the nations in ways that we have never, ever seen before. And you have laid before us a door that no one is going to close. Lord God, we ask that you use us, that we might participate in what you are in the process of doing in this great mix that's happening. And Lord, may we be the conscience for the world in which we live, in the communities in which we find ourselves, in the households that we are at, that we do it with grace, we do that with love, but we do that uncompromisingly, being the voice of you, for we want to honor and glorify your name. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.